The clock is at 0, and another Cougar football game is in the books.
Top 15 scoring defense in the FBS. Rocco back, shot play. Esparza in the clear. First play, touchdown.
I'm them right here. I'm running quarterback power because they know it's coming, and we should run it.
It's Martin instead. He is in. Touchdown. L.J. Martin, just like that. A response from BYU. First and goal. Back to the ground. It is Hansen, and he is in. Touchdown, Cyclones. Becht. Pressure coming. It's intercepted. Picked off on the sideline by Lutui. That was Max Alford with the pressure, the replacement for Acera speeding it up. And BYU has a huge turnover. First and goal, they go right back to Hansen again, directly to him, to the goal line. Let's see. Touchdown, his second. First down, it's a Bachmeier run. Straight ahead, Bear, Bachmeier, touchdown. Again, BYU takes the lead. Bachmeier had to rush it to the end zone. Caught. Kingston is there. Parker Kingston, touchdown out of nowhere. Bear Bachmeier with pressure in his face uncorks a gem.
We're not at that point quite yet, but he knows what it takes to be effective in the fourth quarter.
Intercepted, taken away from Burkle and Satuwala to the end zone for a touchdown.
Now it's time to break down all the action. You're listening to the Cougar Postgame Show on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
It's your Cougar Postgame Show. I'm Christian Esparza Jake Hatch, joining me tonight to break down this lovely BYU win, 41-27 over Iowa State. The Cougars move to 8-0 on the season, 2/3 of the way done through the 2025 season. Hatch and BYU sitting atop the Big 12 right now, 8-0.
Life's good in Provo, Christian. Let's just say that right now. You mentioned the fact that BYU's 8-0 for the first time back-to-back seasons in program history. Not even the great Lavelle Edwards teams of the late 70s, early 80s did what BYU's doing right now, Christian. We're watching a team that it's absolutely remarkable because consider where they were at, down 24-10, just about 2 minutes before halftime. And then they reel off a 31-3 run and come away with another win. And in fact, it's actually the first ever win in program history over Iowa State. Now, they've only played 5 times, but hey, another little history nugget there for Cougar fans out there, but a huge win. There's no doubt about this, Christian. We're going to break all this down because it really feels like, and I want to get your thought on this, kind of feels like a tale of two halves in so many different ways. And in some ways, that touchdown that BYU got just before halftime may have turned the tide in this game.
Well, I agree with you. I actually think the tide flipped on the interception before that led to a BYU field goal. And I know that Iowa State did score after that to push it to 24, right?
Yeah.
So that made it 24-10. But it really felt like once BYU got that interception, and that was the, that was Lutui, right? Dropping in the coverage there.
By the way,
Lutui interception, it felt like that is really when the game flipped.
And that decision by Rocco Becht, because I think it was 4-0 in the turnover margin for BYU today. That interception by Rocco Becht was really weird because he thought the receiver was going to go one way, and Logan Latui's just kind of sitting right there. And was like, okay, I'll take this ball away from you.
Must not have seen him or something.
No, must not have. And that's the thing. I got to give credit to Jay Hill. He disguises coverages and he drops defensive ends into coverage zones when they bring those simulated pressures and the like. It's a really, really nice facet of this BYU defense that, once again, I don't think the defense played out of their minds. They did enough, but they gave up quite a bit of yardage here. I think the final yardage tally, 495 yards. So essentially the second straight week, Christian, that they've given up nearly 500 yards. But you can motor up and down the field between the 20s on this BYU defense. But when they get in the scoring territory inside the 20s, that's when BYU stiffens. And to their credit, they did a really good job about limiting the points that ISU had.
And I really thought BYU, the reason BYU won this game today is they capitalized on the plays that mattered, right? We saw the interceptions, we saw the pick six, we saw the Iowa State player kicking the punt, right? And BYU recovering there.
Yeah.
Taking advantage of those opportune plays is why BYU was able to turn the tide and ultimately basically go on a run, to speak in basketball terms. It really felt like, the sequence at the end of the first half and then going into the beginning of the second half, Iowa State just felt lost. And I know that they kept punching, they kept trying to climb their way back. Hansen had a big run and it felt like, the Cyclones could be back into things, but it seemed like whenever BYU was presented an opportunity, they were able to take that opportunity, take advantage of it, and capitalize. And that led to a lot of points today.
Yeah, this is a game that early on it felt like BYU may get run off the field out there in Ames, but you mentioned that they just found a way, and that's the hallmark of this team, Christian, is they know how to win football games. It's not pretty, nor is it sexy, nor is it like a crazy amount of points they're going to score. In fact, I think outside of the Portland State game, this might be the second highest point output of the year. I have to double check that, but the nice part is, this BYU team, it seems like when the chips are down against them, they just go out there and make plays. And you're right. That the fumble, I guess we call it a muff punt. It's a turnover on that punt. Credit guys like Kevin Doe, because he's the corner that was engaged with the Ngoyi kid from Iowa State on that punt. And he just stayed engaged with him. And Ngoyi absent-mindedly never heard, I guess, the Peter call, whatever they decided to call on the field, and he kicks that ball and BYU recovers it. And that bailed the Cougars out of a scenario where they could have found themselves trying to avoid falling behind once again. Those are the type of plays, to what you're pointing out, Christian, is BYU takes advantage when given the opportunities to go out there and make plays. And that's why they're 8-0 for the second straight year. It's pretty remarkable. And the other thing about this, we talked about this. You and I produce shows for the KSL Sports Zone, and we talked about it early in the week. How is the post-rivalry letdown? How are they going to avoid that? And early on, it didn't feel like BYU was going to be able to avoid it. But to your point, they found a way. They found those plays when given the opportunity, and they made them.
What do you think of starting the game off, giving up a touchdown, first play of the game, deep shot?
Well, I will say this. Matt Campbell and his offensive staff drew up an incredible play call there, because BYU brought the corner blitz. It was Evan Johnson that came on the blitz. And Falatau Satuala, I love him as a safety, but he's not a cover guy in space like that. And that double move cooked him, and they get that touchdown. The nice part was BYU responded the way you wanted them to respond. They weren't rattled. They said, okay, it's one play, let it go. And Falatau Satuala, didn't he get his payback later? That pick six. What a thing.
He did. Yep. Another thing with this BYU win, Hatch, is they did not lead until the fourth quarter. They fought back. Of course, they trailed at halftime. At one point, they were down 24-10. And at that point, you're kind of asking yourself, okay, what kind of game is this really going to be? Is BYU going to get kind of blown out on the road? But then they score before they half. They come out, they kick a field goal to start the second half, and then they tie the game up to end the third quarter. So they go into the third quarter tied 27, and then they open the fourth with a touchdown drive. And that's the first time they led, is that 34-27 at the beginning of the fourth quarter. And so it was not an easy win. It was a win that they had to fight for and that they had to stay focused on. But now they're sitting in a really good spot. Again, 8-0 cannot be overstated. And again, atop of the Big 12 conference, because we all know how crazy this conference can get. They mentioned several times BYU being in the tiebreaker with Iowa State at the end of last season.
Yes.
The last thing BYU wants to do is avoid another 4-team tiebreaker scenario. So you want to stay, of course, you want to finish with the best record possible, right? We know a loss is going to come at some point, but if you can finish this Big 12 season with only one loss, you're not going to be in a tiebreaker scenario. You are going to be in the Big 12 championship.
And that's the thing I think they learned from last year, Christian, to your point. They had a 4-way tie, and just I've seen strength of record or whatever ended up being the tiebreaker, cost BYU their trip to Arlington. And I've been down at every practice this year, and I can tell you they have talked all the time about controlling the controllable. Well, one of the controllables is keeping yourself above the fray of what this Big 12 appears to be devolving into in terms of it being a multiple teams within striking distance. so long as BYU stays as a front runner here and keeps winning football games, yeah, they're going to punch their ticket to Arlington. And the crazy thing is, in many respects, they have one game. You can call it a mulligan. They can still lose one game right now, Christian, and still find themselves very much on pace to play there in Arlington. But they don't even want to deal with that.
It would be nice if you don't have to worry about that.
Exactly. Just keep doing your thing. Now, I will say this bye week they've got upcoming, they need it in a bad way, because we'll get into this, I'm sure. Guys like LJ Martin getting dinged up, CLA Sarah getting dinged up on top of other guys who are unavailable in this contest. Yeah. I hate to use the cliche, but this bye comes at a really, really good time.
Well, and that is where I want to go next. We'll get into some of the highlights, some of the key performances later in the show. But I feel like aside from, taking the win, getting the victory, the biggest storyline of the game is losing LJ Martin. And we don't know what the injury is per se, but he didn't come back in the game after he left early on.
Yeah, he dropped his shoulder on a guy. You saw him get up. They showed the replay. He kind of winces. They took him back to the locker room, and according to the Fox broadcast, I know you were watching as well, say he had x-rays, and they ruled him out quickly thereafter. Never good when x-rays are involved. Like that, you're like, x-rays doesn't sound ideal here. So there is going to be obviously some apprehension over the next 2 weeks as to his status going forward, especially in light of the fact that Sione Moa, who was a really, really fine kind of 1B to his 1A, speaking of LJ Martin, he's been out for a few weeks now after getting injured against East Carolina late in that game, and he hasn't returned yet either. So the running back depth is perilously thin for BYU, and that puts even more on the shoulders of a guy like Bear Bachmeyer, who once again late in this game was limping around. I'm sure you saw that too, Christian, limping a little bit. He has proven to be nothing if not durable. I would highly suggest that don't read much into that, because this is a young man, appears to be a gamer, and yeah, he may be limping around a little bit. He's done that in 3 or 4 of these games for BYU this season and seems to just bounce back the very next game. And with an extra week to prepare, I would expect that he'll be pretty good.
Yeah, and losing LJ was really apparent, right? It was felt BYU really could not run the ball after LJ left the game. I mean, they were struggling to move the ball on the ground even with LJ. He only finished with, I think, 5 or 6 carries before he left, but after that, they really, really basically gave up on trying to run the football. And that's not what you want to do in this scenario. And of course, they were able to get the win, but you're right, the depth is so thin. People have always talked about, like, if there was one thing that would tank BYU's this season, aside from a freshman quarterback making mistakes, it would be LJ Martin getting injured yet again, because he is kind of the focal point of A-Rod's scheme and everything that they want to do. So you really, really hope that, as you're pointing out with next week's bye, like, you're hoping whatever the injury is, it's something that he can heal up, but we will see. That is TBD.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, you mentioned the fact that BYU went away from the run game. I got to give credit to Aaron Roderick. He didn't try and force it. They ran enough to keep Iowa State honest, but you and I saw that in the second half. That became kind of the BYU offenses of the Lavelle Edwards era, where they were just hucking the ball all over the field. And that's a credit to A-Rod understanding, okay, yeah, Preston Rex, Enoch Nawahine, we'll run enough, obviously the Bear as well, to use some of that QB run game to keep them honest. But Bear, it's on your arm today. And I think I'm going to look at the pull stats real quick. He was 22 of 35 for 307 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. So completion percentage a little bit lower. It's 63% than what we've seen previously. But Christian, QB rating, 155.4. Those are winning numbers. That's exactly what you want to see from him, especially on a game that essentially was forced onto his arm.
And the 300 number is nice. I think this is only his second 300-yard game of his career, right? And who would have thought it would come against Iowa State? I know that their kind of big storyline was that they were missing both of their corners. I wasn't sure if that meant A-Rod was going to open up the passing attack, but Bear sure gets a lot of help from Kingston and Chase Roberts with the yaks.
I was going to say yak for them, because I think, let's see, Chase Roberts, 8 catches, 128 yards on 9 targets. Parker Kingston, 7 for 133 on 13 targets. Those two guys, with as many wide receivers on the roster as BYU has, a lot of that passing game has come down to those two guys. And to their credit, they have come up time and time again. And there was a bit of a hot mic moment with Parker Kingston in this game, but he deserves that. He's probably the smallest guy on the field on that play. We're talking about the second touchdown he had in this game. He goes up, gets that ball, comes down, runs over to the sideline mic, and is barking a little bit. Good on him, because you're right. His wide receivers, speaking of Bear Bachmeyer, they have given him a lot of yardage, and you mentioned it, yards after the catch. to credit guys like Chase Roberts and Parker Kingston. They secure the football, but then they try and find the space on the field to get upfield. And that's a nice positive development this season, because it felt like in so many ways that BYU eras past, you catch the ball, get tackled. The nice part is guys like Chase and Parker got some wiggle to them. They're able to get some of that yak, which is a really, really big part of why BYU was able to get up the field in a hurry in this game in particular.
Well, and Hatch, how many times does it seem like, whether it's Chase or Kingston catching the ball, like they've got 5 to 10 yards of open field ahead of them. And I want to give a lot of credit to A-Rod for drawing up these routes and these schemes that clearly is working so well at getting the guys wide open. I mean, he is finding ways to beat the coverages that these defenses are running. And, of course, you've got special players in those two receivers, but it seems like anybody, like you and I, could go out there and catch a pass and get a couple yards.
Hold on. I'm not sure I could do that, but I'm a lineman myself. But to your point, you're right. A-Rod is scheming things up. It's also a credit to these guys route running. They're running very precise, accurate routes, and they're getting themselves, because coaches will tell you speed is one thing on the field when it comes to wide receiver play, Christian, but what sets you apart is your ability to run routes. It's called finding leverage. And what that is making those cuts that throw a DB who may be in coverage with you off a little bit, and that gets you open on those plays. And that's a credit to those guys, because they're absolutely finding themselves open and making these secondaries pay for that. Yes, Iowa State's secondary is decimated due to injury. Just look at their injury chart. They're starting 2 corners from earlier this year, tore their ACL in the very same week. I think it's like week 3 or 4 of the season. But you look at their injury report coming into this game, a lot of DBs, and to BYU's credit, they said, all right, let's test these guys, and they proved not equal to the task, and BYU goes for over 300 yards passing in this game, and huge. Maybe the one key reason why BYU is able to get back into this game is their ability to be really, really solid in the passing game.
You know where else they were solid, Hatch? They racked up 4 sacks in this game, and that's not like a crazy number, but for BYU, that feels like a lot, and especially where they're coming from.
It is a season high, so it absolutely is a strength. And the nice part was, Christian, did they come from Jack Kelly? Did they come from Isaiah Glasker? No, they did not. They came from the defensive line.
Yeah.
We heard Kelly Paping. He had a quote earlier this season. He said sacks are overrated. Well, I felt like he was couching a little bit, trying to cover for his guys because they hadn't been producing in terms of their sack yardage. But the nice part is they delivered. Bodie Schoonover on that final drive for Iowa State, not back to back, but 2 big sacks on that drive alone. The pressure BYU generated with their defensive line against this Iowa State offensive line, that's what they're going to need going forward, because if they can continue to find ways to get after opposing quarterbacks, that makes the defense's job so much easier. And I'm sure Jay Hill was very happy to see that, because it's been lacking in a big way earlier this season.
Well, and that's how you end up with 3 interceptions as well. That's why, I mean, they've, like you're saying, Hill and K-Pop have talked about it all season. Like, yeah, sacks are cool, but if pressures result in takeaways, we'll take that. And three picks plus 4 sacks, that's a huge day for BYU's defense. And again, this is a game that we thought was going to be a defensive slugfest today. So on a night when it felt like BYU's rush defense wasn't playing up to par, on the pass side of things, they were able to make plays and kind of create the havoc that, again, made it so hard for Iowa State to rack up points, because you can run the ball all you want, but if BYU is going to be putting up 41 points, it's going to be hard to match that output with just yards on the ground, right? You're going to have to force Iowa State to move the ball through the air at some point. But when BYU's pass defense is firing on all cylinders like it was today, I mean, it was really, really hard for Rocco Beck to do anything.
It was. And that you're right. Absolutely nailed it with that take there, because the bigger point is to get those turnovers. And when BYU's +4 in the margin, very rarely are you going to lose a football game when you have that many takeaways, especially 3 interceptions. Because in this modern age of football, you and I both know this, Christian, is that interceptions, they're such back-breaking plays in so many different ways, and especially if it's a compounded with a touchdown like Falatau Satuala's was. When that pick 6 went in, you kind of hear the air go out of Jack Trice Stadium outside of BYU fans. Iowa State fans are like, oh crap, and ended up being the final margin, that 14-point difference there. Those type of plays, they are so critical. And you're right, the pass rush is great, getting sacks is great, but if it, as you mentioned, that pressure is forcing a guy like Rocco Becht into some inopportune throws where he gets picked off, that's even better. And BYU's defense will happily trade sacks for interceptions.
It was a great day for BYU's defense, and aside from I guess that first play to start the
Well,
game, right?
yeah.
You can put that behind you.
Well, and in some ways the first half is probably forgettable because I know that Jay Hill, Kalani said it last week after the Utah game. He said we have almost 500 yards of offense. Jay's going to be unhappy about that, and yes, it's 495 total yards for Iowa State, and Jay will be unhappy with that number in terms of the overall yardage. But Kalani and Jay will also point to the fact +4 in the margin in terms of the turnover margin. The fact that they limited them to 27 points, much like Utah, you can go up and down the field as much as you want. But if you're not scoring 30 plus points as a result, that's a win for our defense.
And it really is amazing that, with Bear Bachmeier and the freshman quarterback thing, like this is going to be a storyline every week. There's a huge game today on the road, and you've got a kid, a 19-year-old who comes in, throws for 300 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air, adds another on the ground, and he continues to be just a force to be reckoned with. And I know that teams aren't taking him lightly anymore, but it seems like he continues to surprise everybody. Like no matter how much work Iowa State and Matt Campbell put into the scouting for this game, like you can't let Bear Bachmeier, you can't let the grizzly bear run loose, right?
Yeah, well,
you can't stop him.
Yeah, and that to his credit, I've never seen a more unflappable 19-year-old ever. That sounds probably too crazy to say, but Christian, this kid's 8-0. He came to BYU in June. He had 5 weeks to learn this offense essentially, and then win a starting quarterback job. Then the other 4 weeks in training camp. All he's done is win. And you're right. It's not been with gaudy stats out there and the like, but all he does is make winning football plays. You remember he had that play early in the game where that ball gets stripped out of his hand. What does he do? He kind of he finds the ball, picks it up, kind of rolls out, and then realizes nobody's open downfield, throws it out of bounds, and incomplete pass. No harm, no foul. He had plays earlier this season that he kind of lost his head. I think that it was East Carolina, if I recall correctly, where he had a play like that cost him. I think he threw an interception on that play because he thought he saw a wide receiver open, and the safety picked him off on that. Well, guess what? He learned his lesson. Similar type scenario in this down and distance. Goes and scrambles out a little bit, realizes, okay, there may be a chance to throw something here. I'm not going to risk it. I'm just going to get it out of bounds, and we'll live to fight another down. That's growth. And to your point, he continues to prove that he knows how to win because it may not be the big 500-yard passing performance that some Cougar fans would like to see, but 300 yards is good enough. And who's going to argue with 8-0? Like that's the thing. I say it all the time when I talk to people about BYU football, Christian. The only thing that really matters in the end is your team having more points than the other team at the end of the game. And BYU has done that 8 times this year, and they're likely to be inside the top 10 nationally come tomorrow's rankings.
I love that you bring that play up. Bear has 3 interceptions on the season. I think that play you're referencing was his 2nd interception of the year. Right. Yeah. And that's definitely a case of, your coaches break down the film with you after the game, and the A-Rod or whoever it is says, hey, if you drop the ball, don't try to force anything. Look down the field. If there's nothing there, just throw it out of bounds. And that's exactly what Bear did today. So it is really nice to see a player clearly take the coaching advice and learn from his mistakes that quickly too. And it's funny because it was almost the exact same play and just a couple of weeks later. So really good things that we are seeing from Bear Bachmeier. We are live right now, 1280 a.m. We're also on Facebook, on YouTube, on X. Let us know your thoughts on this game. We're not able to take calls, but we've got the comment sections on YouTube, on Facebook, and on X as well. So let us know your thoughts on this BYU win, 41-27 over Iowa State. BYU still atop the Big 12 Conference, tied with Cincinnati for the lead. Looks like Cincinnati is going to beat Baylor. So both of those teams currently with 0 Big 12 losses. Let us know your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break for the radio side of things. We will be back in about 3-ish minutes. Stick with us, and we'll continue to break down this BYU win on the other side. It's the Cougar Postgame Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
listening to the Cougar Postgame Show on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Cougar Postgame Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza. Jake Hatch is with me as we were breaking down BYU's 41-27 win over Iowa State on the road today in Ames. Big win for the Cougs. Getting a lot of reaction in the chat. We're loving it. Getting a lot of questions about the Texas Tech game coming up in 2 weeks. We will get to that in the third segment, so stick with us. We will get to that later because that is a huge game, Hatch, but let's stick with it. For today, we've talked about a few big performances, obviously. Bear Bachm thrown for over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air, a touchdown on the ground. Chase Roberts and Parker Kingston continuing to do their thing through the air. And then we've got some players on the defense that really stood out today as well. Ultimately, it really seemed like, especially after the second half, as you kind of mentioned, BYU was firing on all cylinders across this team.
Well, and that's a credit to this BYU team because they found themselves facing some difficult circumstances in that first half of that game. I mean, I think the more I think about it, Christian, you mentioned the fact that Logan Latui, that interception, it kind of stemmed the tide for BYU because it was kind of one-way traffic for ISU early on in this game, and he gets that interception, and it kind of helped BYU think defensively in particular, kind of take a breath and be like, hey, we're okay.
We got this, yeah.
We're okay. We can still make plays. And to your credit, they bounced back after that. I do got to give a shout out to both Falatau Satuala and Tanner Wall. I believe second straight week that they were BYU's leading tacklers. Now, is having your safeties be your leading tacklers long-term sustainable product? No, it's not. But especially considering the circumstance BYU found itself in, especially with how good Iowa State was run blocking in this game, those two stood out once again, and they made game-saving plays. Falatau Satuala sealed this win with that pick six, more than making up for the fact that he got burned on that first play of the game. And the defense, while it's not been dominant as it was early on this season, because remember, you and I, we've talked about how dominant this BYU defense was early on this season. I think the level of competition has gone up. And yes, these teams, Utah and Iowa State, the past 2 weeks have gone for nearly 1,000 yards of offense on this BYU defense. But I'm telling you, if you have a team that gets 500 yards of offense but doesn't score more than 30 points, something's wrong. And you know what's wrong? 4 turnovers. This BYU defense makes the plays when necessary to find ways out of situations that otherwise may do other defenses in. That's a credit to Jay Hill. That's a credit to all the coaches, but more particularly, it's a credit to the players on the field. Guys like Satuala, guys like Wall. Got to give a shout out to Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker, like Max Alford as well, because he comes in for an injured Cialia Serra, and I thought had some moments as well. Those guys stepped up when it mattered most.
One thing I'm looking at that kind of stood out to me from the defensive side was the inability to stop the run tonight. And that's something that BYU had kind of hung their hat on throughout the first 7 games of the season. They were top 10 in the country in run defense. Today, they really got shredded. The total tally was 34 carries for 184 yards. But of course, BYU did have 4 sacks today that resulted in about a 31-yard net loss. So in reality, Iowa State basically ran for over 200 yards today on the Cougs. Yeah. Is that something that, if you're BYU, that you're worried about? Or do you think it was kind of just that's really all Iowa State could do today?
No, I am worried about it because the second straight week it's happened once again. And that's a reason why the safeties are your leading tacklers, Christian, because that means they're gashing at the defensive line. They're getting to the second level, going through your linebackers. And that's when the safeties have to step in and make those tackles. There's a reason why they're called safeties. They're the last line of defense. That's why they're back there. And you're right. When a team runs for more than 200 yards on you in back-to-back games, Jay Hill is going to be ripping into his guys over this next week plus during the bye week saying, all right, we've had our fun. We've had moments of brilliance. We've had moments of weakness, but we cannot. And I'm telling you, with Texas Tech, TCU, and Cincinnati still out there on the horizon for BYU, they cannot afford to have teams running for more than 200 yards. They've gotten away with it in back-to-back games, and good on them. They're 8-0. Life's feeling good. They're happy about that. But I know how Jay Hill operates, and that's the number he'll be barking at his guys about over the next 2 weeks as they get ready for Texas Tech. You cannot afford to have teams routinely running for more than 200 yards because that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and like looking at the Utah game, right, a lot of those yards were kind of just off the tackle
Correct. Yeah.
cleanly. And it's not like they were breaking tackles and a lot of that. But tonight I felt like BYU, especially in the first half, was missing a lot of tackles, and which is kind of uncharacteristic from BYU this season. They did seem to clean it up more in the second half, but it really felt like the interior defensive line was getting pushed around a lot today. And that's not something that we are kind of accustomed to. And Hansen had a big day. Of course, he had the 65-yard run breakaway, and then there was another run where he got shoelaced. And if he didn't get shoelaced, he would have had another wide open shot at the end zone. So missing the tackles, I think that's if my takeaway was that's where BYU's run defense was struggling the most tonight, was not really wrapping up and then kind of getting bullied on the defensive front.
You're right. Tackling was an issue. The interior defensive line play, it was really, really good against Utah last week. Because you're right. Last week, Utah attacked the edges. They were going.
They didn't run up the middle at all.
And when they tried, remember, they got stonewalled multiple times. Devin Dampier could not find traction up the middle. I don't know what changed, but I got to give credit to Iowa State's offensive line because they bullied BYU's defensive front. Keanu Tanavasa, the other guys on that interior, Anisi Purcell, John Tamoyapeo. They've got to take it as a point of pride because I'm not going to lie, that Utah game was the best defensive line performance of the season by a country mile for BYU. Outside of that, they've gotten gashed pretty easily in essentially every game, not named Portland State and Stanford, it feels like, Christian. So that interior defensive line play, it needs to continue to improve because if they can't hold teams like Texas Tech down going forward, yeah, guess what? If I'm any of these running backs from Texas Tech, I'm licking my chops thinking about what they could do to BYU's defensive front.
Well, and especially with Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker being banged up the way that they are, I mean, they are still studs in their own right, but they can't do it all themselves. You need a lot of help from Tanavasa and Kirkland and Purcell and everybody on the interior. And I am curious to see what sort of adjustments and changes Jay Hill makes over the next 2 weeks. Not changes as far as like benching anybody or anything, but I'm just saying as far as what he does with those players and how he changes the approach, because that is, the rivalry game. Like, I get it. That's one thing, but then to have it be a kind of repeating offense back-to-back weeks, that's when it starts to raise eyebrows and say, okay, this is something that we need to nip in the bud, because there's still, as you mentioned, a murderer's row of opponents for BYU with Texas Tech and TCU and Cincinnati.
Yeah, like you may think BYU's out of the woods, Christian, with this bye week. No, they're halfway through what Aaron Roderick himself said is the toughest 6-game stretch in BYU football history. Yeah. To their credit, they're 3-0. They're halfway through it, and they're 3-0 against this 6-game stretch. But at what cost has it come? That's the question. Because I'm telling you, that LJ Martin injury, I'm terrified if he's out for any significant period of time here, Christian. Heaven forbid the season. Knock on wood, everything. Do whatever you got to do. Because if he's out for the season and they can't get Sione Moa back, Bear Bachmeyer, you're going to throw for 500 yards next time? Because that feels like it's what it might take. Now, he ended up, I think he had almost 50 yards rushing in this game. Yeah, 12 for 49, so 4.1 yards per carry. But they have said so many times the last few weeks, Christian, they're running him 12 to 15 times. It's not sustainable, and I don't believe it is either. He was limping in this game once again against Iowa State. You can't put everything of this offense on him if you're going to run him. If you're going to, let's say LJ Martin is out long-term, Christian, like I said, heaven forbid that happens. That kid's had an incredible year already. But let's say that comes to worse. I'm telling you, you may have to morph into more of a true air raid passing all over the field type offense, just simply to protect a guy like Bear Bachmeyer.
Yeah, you're going to see a lot more of the quick passing game, right? If need be, because it does feel like a lot of BYU's passing attack right now is intermediate and deep shots. And it's great that you've got a quarterback that can make those plays and make those throws. But, a lot of that, again, is because the running game is such a big threat. So if the running game isn't a threat, it's going to be hard really to, attack the deep shots down the field. So and we'll see.
To your point on that, Christian, all the deep shots BYU likes to take, they're all predicated on play action. And guess what? The only way you build play action is be able to run the football. So I don't know if they spend the next 2 weeks. Let's say LJ Martin is out. Well, Preston Rex, Enoch Nawahine, I know Jovessa Damuni's also there in that running back room. One of those guys is going to have to step up, and you're going to have to manufacture something with that. Like you said, that short passing game, Mike Leach made a living off that short passing game, essentially being the extension of the running game and that air raid offense he ran at Washington State and at Mississippi State. So
yeah,
that could be a bit of a help there. But knowing Aaron Roderick, knowing Kalani Sitake, they're going to want some guys that can put a shoulder down and run through contact, and they're going to have to find a way to find that on the roster somewhere.
And one thing I want to bring up, I should have brought it up earlier, but it just popped into my head. Another area of concern for BYU that I'm really interested as to why Iowa State stopped doing it. But it seemed like in the first half when the Cougars were struggling to put up points and move the ball, Bear was getting pressured a lot on blitzes. It felt like Iowa State was bringing the blitz, and that was really getting to Bear. And I know that there were some adjustments made to the pass blocking in the second half. So maybe, that kind of cleaned things up, but it seemed like Iowa State might have kind of figured out how to rattle Bear because they did get after him quite a bit in the first half.
Yeah, you're right. That actually a very good point on your part. And the more I think about that, you're right. They were able to generate pressure on him, and BYU's offensive line is going to have to be a whole lot better. That also goes on tight ends and running backs, because it felt like in this game when LJ Martin went out, because I'm telling you, against Utah, LJ Martin had a monster day running the football, Christian. But the bigger point I wanted to take away from that Utah game was his pass blocking. It was absolutely incredible. We're talking linebackers, defensive linemen. Didn't matter who came at him. He just absolutely threw his body against these guys and was very, very good. When he went out, you're right. The protection faltered, and that's going to be a concern, because we're going to get to Texas Tech here in a minute with some thoughts. Utah knows how good this Texas Tech pass rush is. It is downright elite. David Bailey is going to be, I think, a top 10 pick. He's got more. I think he actually passed John Henry Daly, I think, in terms of the sack leader for the nation. I think he had 10.5 going into this week. I don't know what Texas Tech is doing right now, but him, guys like Jacob Rodriguez from Texas Tech, they're going to bring the pressure. And if Iowa State can get pressure on a guy like Bear Bachmeier, I can tell you Texas Tech can do just that. So BYU's offensive line, they got to up their game significantly.
All right, that takes care of, I think, a lot of the concerns coming out of this game. Bit of a downer segment. I do want to move into. Oh, you got something else?
I want to add one more thing.
Okay.
Now, with regards to the situation that Bear Bachmeier continues to get banged up, I wouldn't worry too much about him in terms of like him limping around in a game like this. Trust me, I've gotten some text messages. Did you see him limping? I've seen him limp like 5 different games this year, Christian. Like it feels like we see this every game with him, but he battles back each week. The bigger concern I've got is, to your point, if BYU is unable to protect him, that's a concern. But once again, to take pressure off of him, you've got to find a way to run the football. And I don't know where it's going to come from, because I don't want him running more. Him running more equals danger zone for BYU, because you lose him as a quarterback, you sink your season, it feels like, in so many ways.
Never want to see him run 22 times again. No. That's totally unsustainable. He's already got so much on his plate. So
correct. So the bigger point I want to point out here is BYU has to go back to the drawing board and figure out what LJ Martin's status is, how long he's out, but then spend these next 2 weeks, Christian, devising a new game plan. I'm not saying go through it and create a whole new offense, but find what in the playbook is going to protect him as much as you possibly can, and B, is effective to help you continue to win football games, because you can ill afford to keep him running the way he is, and ill afford to keep having him get the hits he's taking as well.
Well, and that's I'm glad you said that, because that's what I wanted to get at as far as why it's unsustainable for him to run that much.
Yeah.
He's not a guy that's going to slide or get out of bounds or avoid hits. Every time
actually when he slid earlier he had that one QB run around the edge and he slid. People are like, why is he sliding?
I think that's the first time he slid all season.
You're right.
Like, this is a dude that invites contact, and to his credit, he always covers up the ball with both hands, right? He's not at a risk of fumbling, but he is so big, he's not afraid to take a hit or two. And that really adds up over the course of a season. So if LJ Martin's out and Bear Bachmeier is going to be running, that's bad news. You don't want him to be running up the middle and getting hit by the linebackers 15 times a game and then taking hits on blitzes another 5 or 6 times. Like, that's too many hits for your quarterback. He's not the type to evade hits, and he's not built to have that many carries. It is nice to have his big, powerful presence back there to pick up a touchdown and, pick up a tough first down when they need it. But he is not the type of dual threat quarterback where speaking of Utah with Dampier, where you build his rushing attack into the offense. It's a lot different.
Yeah, and to your point, he had that touchdown run early in this game, Christian. Those are the runs that you absorb when it comes to the run game with a QB, because you're right. He's so good in the run game. Don't be risking him in terms of like on the 50-yard line being like, all right, let's run him up the middle. That's not the play. When you get in the scoring territory, yeah, absolutely put the ball in his hands, because he has proven to be very, very effective running the football. It's just being cognizant of how many hits he's taking in these games, both in the pass and run games, because they're adding up. You mentioned we're 2/3 of the way through this season, and BYU's got a really special thing going here, Christian. You can ill afford to have it fall apart now.
Yeah, and I'm sure during the game, Bear doesn't think about it. And then after the game, he's like, man, I hurt all over. And it's like, yeah, Bear, you got to be a little more careful out there. I'm sorry.
Well, and here's the thing. You're right. He is built to absorb hits because he's 220 plus pounds. Not very many freshman quarterbacks in college football are built like this kid is, but this is a level of football he's never played out before, Christian. Yeah. And he's been remarkably durable considering all he's absorbed this year. I just want to see this BYU staff be a little more cognizant of not putting him at risk when you have something like BYU's built right now. Because I'm telling you, it feels like if he were to go down, this season may sink very, very quickly.
Yeah, it is, because we don't know what the rest of the situation is, right? If a true freshman, and granted, Bear Bachmeier's played great through these 8 games, but if it's a true freshman that won the job, it's like, yeah, the room must not be great outside of that. So you want Bear in there. I wanted to point to the 3rd and 4th down efficiency.
Yeah.
This afternoon, 6 of 15 on 3rd down, but 3 of 3 on 4th down. There were a couple big 4th down conversions, including one, I think at least one in the red zone that led to some points. So that was huge. And it was a big night on those money downs, right, for Kalani Sitake and this team, especially considering all the fiasco we saw last week with some of the decisions to go for it.
You're right. And BYU is always going to be aggressive when it comes to 4th downs, Christian. That's just part of who Kalani's kind of morphed into as a head coach. But I think that 6 of 15, while it's not 50+% on 3rd down, that's actually an improvement for BYU over the Utah game in particular, because you're right, those money downs, you got to find ways to sustain drives, and BYU found that in this game. Let's say they had a game like they had against Utah, because it was like 3rd quarter when they finally got a 1st down conversion against the Utes. In a game like this, you very, very well may have found yourself completely out of the game. So sustaining drives, critical. So that's a good point by you to bring that up, because 6 of 15, that's nearing 50%. Now, I don't expect you to be like 10 of 15. That's just absolutely incredible if you are that in a game. But if you can get somewhere around 50%, that's a good thing to have. But to your point, you had 3 of 3 on 4th down beyond that. That's just as good as a 3rd down conversion, because it keeps the drives alive. And you're right, those end up with points on those drives. It's a big reason why BYU stemmed the tide like they did and came back to win.
And they only had 1 punt in the second half, and that was in garbage time, right? And I know theoretically, technically, Iowa State was still alive at the time, but really, I mean, to only have to punt once in the second half, that's a big pointer as to, yeah, BYU really figured this thing out offensively. And kudos to them, especially, again, pointing to the lack of the running game today without LJ Martin. It's really hard to make those conversions on 3rd and 4th down, because if you don't have a running game, you're probably in a lot of 3rd and longs, right?
Correct.
So, to have that sort of efficiency in the second half and score as many points as they did, it really speaks to, I guess, this offense kind of adapting to the way that the game was flowing.
It was, and that's a credit to the coaching staff, kind of understanding kind of the circumstances and adjusting on the fly. You and I have both seen the conversations that people like to have about Aaron Roderick. This is a game you got to give him his flowers. Like he adjusted on the fly, because you're right. This offense was built on LJ Martin and that punishing rushing attack. Well, guess what? You lose that guy. You don't have a capable option to kind of be that bell cow in the running game. All right. What are we going to do? All right, take the running plays. We're putting them to the side. We're going to throw the ball. And the wide receivers ran really, really nice routes. And I don't ever want to hear anybody say that Bear Bachmeier can't throw the ball all over the yard, Christian. He showed more than capable of attacking all levels of this field.
And I think this is the first game where we haven't had Fire A-Rod comments in the chat, so that's great.
Good job, everybody. Good job.
No, you know what? I've actually loved what Aaron Roderick has done all season. And I think, as you know, a lot of times BYU fans are a little hyperbolic on the Fire A-Rod talk. But I agree. Bear we got somebody chiming in. Fire A-Rod right on cue. That's hilarious. No, I think that when you've got a guy like Bear with the arm talent that he has, he really is able to make every single throw. And speaking to the passing attack and opening it up a little more, JoJo Phillips has been practicing, and that's been reported. We don't know for certain if he's going to be back for the Texas Tech game after the bye, but he's been practicing for 2 weeks now, I think. So it would seem to me, and I'm just speculating here. I'm not reporting anything. I'm just speculating. It would seem to me like there's a decent shot JoJo Phillips is back for Texas Tech. And that would do wonders because he is a guy that was supposed to have a big role in this passing game. And he's really been out since the first game of the season.
You're right. And him coming back would be nice to have. We'll see. I am interested to see how quickly he can get reintegrated. Now, having that bye week to kind of reintegrate him, that is a positive in terms of that. So we'll see if and when he gets back on the field. Ready. He has been practicing. My question is he going to be as effective as he was earlier on the season when he was available? That's my question right now.
And again, that was just speculation. I'm just guessing basing on knowing that he's been practicing. There is a very good chance that maybe he's not back for Texas Tech because, again, he had to have surgery. We don't know exactly what the injury was, but who knows?
They've alluded to it. It was a collarbone injury. Like they've been
really? Okay.
Yeah, so.
Well, that would be tough.
Yep. So the bigger point is getting him reintegrated, getting him kind of on the same page as everybody, because he sat out a lot of games, and a lot of guys like Chase Roberts and Parker have been kind of shouldering that load. To have him come in and help take some of that load off these guys would be a positive.
Yeah. We've got some people speculating in the chat on LJ Martin's injury that hasn't been released. We don't know the extent of that injury. Hatch, you did bring up X-rays were what the broadcast were saying, and then he was confirmed out. He never returned. So those two things together, that's a bad sign. Yeah. But we will await official word. I'm not sure we're going to learn anything tonight. I'm sure Kalani Sitake is going to give us we'll give it the weekend and then see. It might not be till, Monday, right? They'll still have availability Monday, even though it's a bye.
Yeah, they'll have availability Monday. At least I would anticipate that. That's what they traditionally have done. But the tough part is we won't have any player availability reports until the week of Texas Tech. So we're like 10 plus days out before actually seeing anything, I'm sure, come out from BYU.
But I guess, heaven forbid, if it were a season-ending injury, we would probably know Monday. But again, who knows?
Yeah, that's kind of on BYU to decide if they want to reveal that or not. I think if
the coaches play this, man.
Well, yes, and you're right. I am interested to see what they ultimately do reveal on that, but I fully expect that they will be very touch and go with how much information they release on that front.
Still awaiting post-game media availability from Kalani Sitake. He is probably currently taking the podium. I haven't been obviously on social media to catch any quotes, but we will get that up if we are able to get that in time. In the meantime, leave some thoughts in the chat, in the YouTube comments, in the Facebook comments on X as well. Tweet at us. Let us know your thoughts on this game, on BYU's win, on the outlook for the rest of the season. Any questions you have for us, let us know. We're going to get into a little bit of a Texas Tech preview because obviously that's such a big game for the Cougs. But first, we got to hit a break. We will get to Texas Tech next. Stay with us. It's the Cougar Postgame Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
listening to the Cougar Postgame Show on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
It's your Cougar Postgame Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza. Jake Hatch with me as we are continuing to break down BYU's 41-27 win at Iowa State. 8th win of the year, Hatch. Cougs are 8-0. They continue to roll. Big bye next week. And then you got to take on Texas Tech in Lubbock.
Well, and that's the thing is this gauntlet for BYU doesn't stop. RG3 said it after the game. He still believes BYU, he said after the Utah game, has national championship quality to them, but they're going to have to prove it because this Texas Tech team, they kind of fumbled in terms of their game last week against Arizona State. So they have to find a way to bounce back in their own right. I still think they're the odds-on favorite probably to play in Arlington. That's maybe opposite of BYU if BYU keeps pace here. But that game in Lubbock, man, it's going to be a big one for the Cougars.
It is interesting because technically Tech has one conference loss. Right now, BYU and Cincinnati are undefeated, but BYU still has Tech and Cincinnati left on the schedule, right? So we could have an interesting finish to the season depending on how the rest of the schedule goes. But I mean, basically the entire comment section tonight has been, thank goodness for next week's bye because the Texas Tech game is so big. Yeah. It is a huge game. I mean, we saw them firsthand not too long ago when they came into Utah, came into Salt Lake City and beat Utah the way that they did. And it was a close game until it wasn't. And they really blew it open in the fourth quarter. But it really felt like they dominated Utah on both sides of the ball at the line of scrimmage. And that's where it started. And I guess that's where it starts for BYU, right? You got to make sure at the line of scrimmage where tonight they weren't really, the better team. You can't have that happen against Tech.
No, you can't, because if you do, you're going to find yourself in a trouble just with regards to all of a sudden things could spiral out of control. That's the thing BYU's got to avoid here, Christian, is finding themselves as they're winning these games, avoiding a letdown where it affects them because the psyche of young men when it comes to football is a crazy, crazy thing, and you need to avoid fumbling your opportunity here. We talked about it earlier. BYU wants to play in Arlington. They got to stay kind of above the fray when it comes to the mess that the Big 12 appears it may become in terms of avoiding tiebreakers. BYU got burned a season ago, losing to Kansas and then losing to Arizona State and then losing their opportunity to play for a Big 12 title. They know how close they were a season ago, and you can guarantee they're trying to avoid that this year.
Tech, by the way, big win today, 42-0 over Oklahoma State. Obviously, Oklahoma State, bottom of the Big 12, literally the worst team in the conference. They fired Mike Gundy, what feels like ages ago, right? Still reeling from that. But, I mean, to blank anybody and then put up 42 points, that's a big statement win for Texas Tech. And still no Baron Morton, but still 2 weeks, right, until they see BYU. So you kind of assume he'll be back by then, but you never know.
Well, and that's the point is they're trying to get Baron Morton ready for that game. It feels like that's kind of, I think that's the target I would imagine of what Texas Tech's trying to do here because they know how big that game against BYU is. And no offense to Oklahoma State, whoever plays Oklahoma State the rest of the season, Christian, you can essentially name your score.
Get right game,
because they're in a rough spot right now. So I am interested to see how Tech responds in terms of managing Baron Morton because they've been like he's day to day. I think the whole goal is to have him healthy when they play BYU. Will Hammond's been very, very capable, and he was very, very good in this game as well. Because 42-0, that's a very impressive win for Texas Tech with him at the helm of that position. But you can guarantee they want to have their guy, speaking of Baron Morton, ready when BYU shows up in Lubbock.
And it's interesting, right? Because Hammond came in against Utah, and there were a lot of people saying, should Hammond be playing instead of Baron Morton? And then the next time we saw Will Hammond was against Arizona State, and he lost that game. He wasn't able to get it done. So I guess that kind of points to why Baron Morton was the starter. But then again, as you're saying, 42 points today for Hammond and that Tech offense. Of course, it is against Oklahoma State, but we know that Texas Tech, what they've been good at this year is basically everything on both sides of the ball. And it's kind of a credit to how much money they've spent. And I don't want that to feel like a cop-out storyline, but they have really been able to build their team through the transfer portal. They've always been good at putting up points, but Hatch, this year they actually have a legit defense.
They do. And trust me, there are some teams of Texas Tech eras past, led by Patrick Mahomes, that dream of having the defense that Texas Tech has right now. Because had they had any semblance of a defense, Patrick Mahomes might have actually won some games in Lubbock, it feels like. More than I think it ended up like 5 was the most he ever had in his time at Texas Tech, because the defenses were just so bad. They were all offense, no defense. And to have a legit defense now, screams the Texas Tech. They mean business, and you're right. The money they spent, money well spent. I don't have any problem saying that, because in this day and age of college football, the teams with the biggest budgets, they're winning. They're winning, Christian. Like look at Ohio State. They're unstoppable. And guess what? They spent as much, if not more, than Texas Tech, if you believe most of the reports out there.
Oh, I would definitely believe it. And we've had local coaches say it's not going to be long before the top 10 highest payrolls are the top
Correct.
10 best teams in college football, if it's not already. And it's a credit to the boosters. It's a credit to, I guess, the new direction that college football is trending, where literally anybody could be good. You just have to have the money to pay for it. And we're kind of seeing that already. So it's a big game for BYU. And again, want to point to the records. Texas Tech already the one conference loss, BYU still with 0. So if they can come out of that game with a win and be 9-0 somehow, I know it sounds like defying expectations, but that's kind of what BYU's done all season, right?
Yeah, well, you're right. It's crazy to say this, but if they were to beat Tech, Christian, some Cougar fans might be able to start making some plans to go to Arlington, Texas. I mean, I don't want to put the cart before the horse there, but that's how big this game it kind of appears to be for BYU on the horizon. Is you handle that one, you have a bye week to get ready, you have a bye week to get healthy, hopefully ahead of that game, and if you win it, you got the tiebreaker over Tech. That's their second loss. That kind of throws them into the hopper when it comes to who maybe emerges, because we've got a lot of teams with 2 losses right now. Iowa State's kind of been cast back out of the race because they lost to BYU today. That's 3 losses for them, so they're appearing to be on the outside looking in. But a win over Texas Tech, especially considering they lost to Arizona State last week, massive opportunity for BYU.
And I don't think it can be overstated how big it is having the bye before that game.
Yeah.
Right. We talked a lot about it going into it, getting healthy, still unknown with LJ Martin, still unknown with Sione Moa, Cialia Serra, not really sure what happened to him today. JoJo Phillips, potentially, who knows there. But also, we saw today, Iowa State looked so good in the first half because they had a bye week to prepare for BYU. So when you've got the extra week of prep, you can basically spend 2 whole weeks getting ready for that one game, where Texas Tech has to prep for TCU next week, which is, again, they got to wake up for that, right? They can't start thinking about BYU yet. It really does give BYU the advantage, and Kalani Sitake is really good coming out of those byes.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is you got to take advantage of this, because you're right. It kind of sets up to help BYU, because TCU's no slouch, and BYU will see TCU right after they play Texas Tech. So that obviously is one thing to pay attention to. But I think what we saw from Iowa State, for example, in this game against BYU, is that was 2 weeks worth of being able to game plan against BYU, and they came out and punched BYU in the mouth. And BYU was able to bounce back. That's a credit to them being able to find a way. But the issue is, can you do the same thing that Iowa State did to BYU today, but sustain it first 60 minutes down there? And that's the big question that BYU will have to answer. And they're 8-0, Christian, so I don't have any way to say that they're not going to do it, because they continue to prove me, and I think everybody else out there, wrong.
And they're definitely going to have to answer the haymakers next week, right? And again, we saw it today. They went down against Iowa State. We've seen it multiple times this season. They went down at Colorado, at Arizona, right? Had to claw their way back, and they do. And it's a testament to Bear Bachmeier and his mentality. Kalani's mentioned it several times throughout the year. He doesn't get too high. He doesn't get too low. He is even keeled as they come. So it's really hard when you are playing in a deficit to keep your head on straight and get your team back where they need to be. But we've seen BYU go down multiple scores several times this season, and they've ended up with wins in all 3 of those games. So I would imagine at some point they're going to be trailing in Lubbock, but we'll see how the Bear responds after that.
Can't count this kid out. He proves time and time again to be able to make plays to win football games for you, Christian. So that's the good sign if you're a Cougar fan out there, is that yes, yeah, they probably find themselves down. They've been down in 3 of these Big 12 games so far. Think about it. They were down at Arizona, They've been down at Iowa State, and they were also down. Um, who am I missing? I'm missing one other one.
Colorado.
It's Colorado. Yeah, at Colorado. They've rallied to win all these football games. This team knows how to win, and that's a hallmark of what this Kalani Sitake led program is they just continue to find ways to win, even though it seems like things may be going against them. You can't count them out. Iowa State learned that. The most recent example of this, Christian, is they thought they had BYU on the ropes. What did BYU do? They punched right back, and they found a way to win this football game and did it with a flourish. That's a really, really good football team we got playing in front of us, speaking of the Cougars.
Just got an email. Kalani Sitake is done at the podium. Our wonderful producer, Sean, is cutting that up as we speak, getting that ready to play. So stay tuned for that. We will have that shortly. Can't wait to hear what Kalani Sitake has to say at the podium. But 19-2 over the past 2 seasons, Hatch. It really feels like, obviously, this team is amazing. There's a lot of, I guess, senior-led talent in this group, but over the past 2 years, it feels like Kalani Sitake has kind of taken the next step into being one of the premier college football head coaches in the country. I mean, he has done an excellent job with this program. And speaking to what you were just talking about, these guys are never out of the game, no matter what the score is. It feels like they can come in and beat anybody. Kalani, man, has really done such a great job.
He has. And I'm a bit baffled by it all, Christian, quite frankly, because we had Barry Trammell on with DJ and PK earlier this week, and he did I think you probably heard this. He talked about the blind resume that he did with PK, and he's talking about Georgia Tech, and he said, how is Georgia Tech ranked where they're at, and where's BYU at in regards to this? Because it looks like BYU's got the better resume, and I don't know what it's going to take for the nation to kind of sit up and say, hey, this BYU team's pretty good. Maybe it's this game, Christian. Maybe it's the fact that they beat Utah and Iowa State in back-to-back weeks. They got a rivalry win over their arch rival. They went on the road immediately the week after, went to Ames, Iowa, and beat a pretty darn good Iowa State team. Maybe, just maybe, the nation will start to pay attention to what BYU's doing, because this is a really, really good football program. And that's the impressive part about this is they may not be flashy. They're not like us Indiana out there where Kurt Signetti's putting up like 60 points all the time. But guess what? You can't argue with the winning that BYU's doing.
And speaking to, there was a lot of talk last week about how much BYU is at Utah and how much Utah is at BYU. This is not a flashy program anymore. This is a team that is not afraid to win with their toughness and their grittiness and their defense. And again, today, Bachm threw for 300 yards. Wonderful performance by him, but it's the defense with the 3 takeaways and then the special teams with the 4th one, right? That's the recipe to victory for BYU this season. And again, that points to Kalani Sitake and the way that he's kind of changed this program over the past couple years, because even with Jaron Hall just 2 or 3 years ago, that's not what it was. And even with Zach Wilson, it's not the same thing. They got into the Big 12 and they recognized we have to become a tough physical team. That's all they talked about this week, and they have done it.
Well, and that they also pointed to the fact that when BYU played Iowa State the last time in 2023, it was like 43-10, I think it was the final, and they got their butts kicked. And since then, they said it was kind of a wake-up moment for BYU as a program to be like, oh, this is what the Big 12 is all about, Christian. Like, it is physical, it's tough, it's a grind every single week. It's going to beat you up and it's going to chew you up. Everything that you want to talk about, they learned, I think, in that Iowa State game in so many ways, kind of taught this program, okay, here's what you guys got to do to be able to win. And ever since then, I think Jay Drew pointed it out, and maybe even somebody else, BYU's not lost more than a single possession game since that Iowa State loss in 2023, Christian. Pretty remarkable what the lessons that they learned early on in their Big 12 tenure and how quickly they turned it around.
Yeah, and again, the 19-2, of course, those 2 losses were, I mean, if they didn't suffer those, they would have been in the Big 12 championship last year. And that's kind of the intertwined storyline that they had with Iowa State coming into this game. So getting the win today, I guess, felt like kind of a full circle moment, because they did so many times bring up that loss 2 years ago. And then the tiebreaker last year was brought up. So it feels like coming out on top today was kind of like the emergence of, okay, we have proved to ourselves that we are ready to compete in the Big 12, but today we kind of proved to everybody.
Well, I think it's a bit cathartic for him because remember last year they lost those two games right after the rivalry game, and there were so many people, Christian. They were like, "All right, well, we'll see how BYU responds." And early on in this contest, they didn't respond as well as you would have thought they did. But to their credit, they rebounded in the game and won it. And you're right. I think it may have told the Big 12 this BYU team is legit. They're on track to play in Arlington, and everybody's kind of chasing them now. I know Cincinnati's very much us right there in the race with BYU because they're still undefeated in Big 12 play, but everybody wants to take down the king, Christian. The good news is BYU is the king right now. And I know that I don't want to make it sound like I'm crowning them. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying they're on top of the league right now. So everybody's kind of chasing them and trying to knock them off. Texas Tech will get the next shot. Then it's TCU. Then it's Cincinnati. Then they finish up with UCF. There's still 4 more opportunities for teams to knock BYU down a peg. But on the flip side of it, BYU has got to be thinking, all right, it's 4 more opportunities to go out and prove ourselves and legitimize ourselves in the eyes of everybody else.
Exactly. Let's get to Kalani Sitake. He wrapped up at the podium. Again, sometimes, I'll be on social media a little bit trying to pick up quotes. I haven't been able to pick up anything. So let's throw to Kalani. Again, just a reminder, because of BYU broadcast guidelines, we're not able to play the full thing. We've chopped off the first portion of what he had to say. So let's throw it down to the BYU podium.
Great game. Glad our guys were able to come through and get the win there, and had a lot of things going against us, especially at the beginning, and that was because Iowa State is a really good team, and I know told the guys they were ranked for a reason, and then they had a bunch of injuries that kind of slowed them down, and I thought they had a great game plan and made things really difficult for us, and especially in the first half and first quarter especially, and so hats off to Coach Campbell and to Iowa State. I thought they did a great job with the game plan, and we had to make some adjustments and things like that. But I'm glad that our guys are able to hold their composure and know that it's a long game, and that just keep playing and keep plugging away. And so I thought it was a great environment. I enjoyed being here. I know it was loud and it was a difficult place to play, and I think it's a beautiful venue. The fans are awesome on both sides. I thought Iowa State was awesome supporting the team, and I think this is a really good Iowa State team. I think a lot of the issues have been the injuries. Once they start getting, you saw once they got Carson back, you saw what he can do with the ball in his hands, and Rock was always dangerous. I thought if we just kept making it difficult for them, I said that over and over again, then we gave up a bunch of big plays, and so if we can limit the offense to the big play production, and just not get as many big plays, I think we'll be better as a team. But overall, it took all 3 phases. I thought the poise that our leaders had and the poise our coaches had was awesome, and it took all three phases for us to fight back into this, and really happy about the end result. Really happy about the second half, to be honest with you. Looking at the way we turned that around, and just felt good. Felt like we were in control with a lot of the clocks and just overall momentum and the tempo. So once I was done, I felt like we can be in a really good spot, making other teams have to play catch up. I kind of like that, and so we were able to get our big playmakers in there and get another turnover. So really happy with the production from our team. All 3 phases have been done a great job with coaches and the leaders, and now we have a bye coming up. We'll take advantage of it, get an early start on Texas Tech. Use our second bye differently than we did the first bye because the science tells us to. And so we'll do everything we can to get our team ready mentally, physically, and spiritually, get ready for the next one in a couple weeks. So what questions do you guys have for me?
What adjustments specifically did you make?
I'm not going to tell you any specific adjustments. No, I think just keep the energy going, and really it's the big plays. A lot of it, they were making some great plays. Sometimes that happens, and when you're going against a really good team, and I have to remind everyone, these guys played for the conference championship, so it's not like you're just going to go in there and just mop people up. And they've actually had a bunch of injuries, and even watching like Big Citrus, he's still not 100%, but he will be next week, and those guys, and I just talked about like with what Hansen was able to do. This is a really good team. So, we were fortunate to quiet the storm that happened and then try to find a way to get some stacked plays on plays. And I felt like once we started doing that, getting momentum, the guys started seeing it and started to create some momentum on our sideline, the energy, and the rest worked out in our favor. So, really well-coached team, great battle. I feel for them because I know they're going through a lot of injuries, but they're going to be even more dangerous as they continue, in conference play, and I think they're going to get some victories. So we'll be cheering them on.
How much did the offense change after that in the first quarter?
A little bit, but I think what we saw from what we can do on the offensive side was just get some first downs, get some chunk yardage. And they're a difficult team. I mean, this is a coaching staff that's been together for a while, so this is a system that's been in place. We knew that if we just keep plugging away and not getting down ourselves, we don't have to make it all up in one play. And we knew that we'd have to kind of possibly take some fourth downs and convert them, and we were able to choose the right ones, and even choosing to decide when to kick field goals. I thought was a really good moment for us, and Will was ready whenever it happened. Although he can work on his kickoffs a little bit better because we kicked a couple of them out of bounds. So Will's human. We'll make sure to fix that before we get up to Lubbock. But really happy with overall adjustments from everybody on all three phases, the coaches and players. It was awesome.
All right, there you go. That's Kalani Sitake addressing the media post-game. About what you would expect, I think the biggest takeaway that he was hammering on that we didn't really touch on, I mean, we kind of did, but his takeaway was he wants to limit the chunk plays that they gave up defensively. But other than that, I mean, it's basically echoing what we had already covered throughout the show.
Well, okay, he can say that the offense changed a little bit, Christian. It changed a lot.
He said, I'm not going to tell you what adjustments we made, but we made some adjustments.
We saw them, Kalani. Don't worry. We saw the adjustments. Don't worry.
Yeah.
You went to the passing game. That's okay. But you're right, Christian. He's right. Limiting the chunk plays absolutely has got to be cleaned up. They've got to figure that out ahead of Texas Tech. You got 2 weeks to clean that up. But yeah, the offense, it morphed in game. There's just no doubt about that.
Big win for BYU, man. 8-0. They are still on a roll, and they've got a bye week, hopefully, to get healthy. That's another point of emphasis Kalani was making. Of course, still unknown the status of LJ Martin, Ciale Acera, Sione Moa, JoJo Phillips, countless others with the big Texas Tech game. 2 weeks from now, of course, hopefully the bye week will help get at least a couple of those guys back on the field. Not to mention Jack Kelly dealing with the shoulder injury he had, and Isaiah Glasker has been dinged up as well. I mean, you're midway through the season, 2/3 of the way through the season. Everybody's dinged up at some point. So it really is a great time for the bye.
Yeah, there's a lot of bumps and bruises, as you would expect. And a lot of guys need some time off here, Christian, to rest their bodies because it's a violent game. Football is a truly violent game, especially at the Power 4 level here. I got to give massive credit to guys like Jack Kelly because the shoulder injury he sustained a few weeks back, the fact he's back playing with that, absolutely incredible. Hope that Ciale Acera is back soon. You mentioned the fact that Isaiah Glasker, I'm telling you, Isaiah Glasker looks like he is just like a walking mash unit right now. It feels like he's got braces and tape everywhere on him to keep him upright, and he continues to make plays. So get some rest, get some downtime, get these guys healed up a little bit, and hopefully you're a lot fresher than when you were against Iowa State when you take on Texas Tech.
No doubt. That'll do it with us here tonight. Again, want to thank Mitch Harper for sending the sound in over from Ames. Want to thank Sean producing, getting the sound ready, keeping us on the radio side of things. Hatch, thank you for jumping in, filling in on a Saturday for Annapolis. And then we will catch you, of course, in 2 weeks, BYU on bye next week for the next Cougar Postgame show. So for everybody, thank you for listening. I'm Christian Esparza, Jake Hatch joining me. It has been your Cougar Postgame show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.